This is the video that I created about a year ago, so published on February 6th last year. It was about the real estate business cycle by Martin Armstrong. This is Martin Armstrong. He was interviewed by Greg Hunter there. And yeah, I pretty much follow his blog. It's armstrongeconomics.com/blog. He's got this computer model, and most people claim that they have one, but his he says is the true artificial intelligence, where the system learns the patterns and keeps adding to the database. So he's been able to predict things down to a single day. They even created a documentary about him called The Forecaster. So this is the real estate business cycle, and it's so what it shows is that from 1955 it was an uptrend up to 2007, which is when we had the famous, in US and a few other countries, maybe Spain, Ireland, there was a big kind of a crash in some places, pretty serious, down to 2012. And then we had a bounce, and we thought, well, according to this model, by the way, this is for the United States, but it obviously reverberates throughout the world, whatever happens in the States. So 2015, it was supposed to start heading down. That would continue that 26-year contraction from 2007 down into 2033. This is how far his model looks into. But what's actually happened in the real world? I talked to my cousin in the States, and the property is booming in most parts. We know that. What's propping it? It's in Australia, it's negative gearing, first homeowner grants. They got all sorts of low interest rates. What else are they going to come up next? I think they've actually run out of bullets. But another thing that obviously happens is the China, where the money is trying to leave China. So Chinese are happy to buy properties that are maybe even 20, 30, 40, 50%, 100%, whatever, 50% overvalued, just to get their money out of China, because they've probably had an experience where the communist government just turns around and says, hey, this is not yours anymore. We need to take it from you for the greater good. That's how communism works, by the way. Although their system is capitalist, but a communist, so go figure. So what's actually happened? Sydney and Melbourne, double-digit growth every year, and that double digit sometimes starts with number 2. So like 20% rise in prices, housing prices in Sydney, Melbourne. The rest of the country is up the creek without the pedal, to be honest. Not much is going on, but Sydney and Melbourne are they keep pushing forward. So let's see some of the commentary from so-called experts. Anyway, this is from the business program on ABC here in Australia.
First up tonight, the OECD's warning of the risk of a rout in Australian house prices. As household debt hits a record 123% of GDP, the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development is sounding the alarm on an economic downturn if borrowers head for the exit. It says both prices and household debt are at unprecedented highs, with property values surging 250% in real terms since the 1990s. Local analysts say there is a risk, but it's hard to see a trigger for a crash unless interest rates and unemployment rise sharply. Some property watchers agree Sydney and Melbourne are headed into bubble territory, and that's overinflating the national market by more than 20%. I was joined by Louis Christopher from SQM Research and Nerida Cornersby, the chief economist with REA Group, in the studio earlier. Louis Christopher and Nerida Cornersby, welcome. Now, the warning from the OECD is fairly clear today. Do you think we're heading for a housing-led recession? Louis Christopher first.
Not this year, but clearly on our numbers, Sydney and Melbourne are overvalued, significantly overvalued. And so the trigger to require for the next downturn is not that much. Might be just, say, a 0.5% increase in the interest rates, or the Australian Prudential Regulation Authority to step into the market again. Look, the odds are increasing that we will have a downturn, at least in Sydney and Melbourne. I wouldn't say that, though, for the rest of the country.
And you think 2018?
we're thinking 2018, there does appear to be some storm clouds on the horizon for that year.
And Nerida, your thoughts?
Look, I think it depends what happens to interest rates this year. Not so much what the Reserve Bank does, but what the banks do. So we see very clearly on our realestate.com.au site that once interest rates start to rise, we do see a drop-off in demand. Will we see a crash? We don't think so. I mean, we'd have to see a pretty rapid rise in interest rates or alternatively a big rise in unemployment. And at the moment, Sydney is doing very well economically, as is Melbourne. So, we can't see that on the horizon at this stage.
And
All right, well, nobody's prepared to call it a huge crash, but they both agree that there's going to be a pullback. So, I mean, is that the environment you want to be investing in? And it isn't, but hey, experts, so-called experts, have been predicting this for years, including myself, except that I'm not the expert. So, what's really going to happen? I'm going to share another few clips for you in this video so we can maybe try and get a little bit more information and the feel about what is about to happen. Okay, we don't only have real estate agents spooking prices of housing and the government doing everything they can to keep it up because they collect more taxes on sales, stamp duties, as well as the Chinese money inflow. We've got these real estate agents have been doing this forever. And watch this little clip where the agent is pretending that they've actually made a mistake in something called underquoting. So for those who are unfamiliar with underquoting, is that a real estate agent will say, hey, this house should be, it's out there in the market for $500,000. Yeah, good luck with 500. But for this example, 500,000, where they know that the actual vendor, the owner, wants $600,000. But they'll say 500,000. So if I'm a buyer, I'm going to be thinking, well, $500,000 is a pretty good price for that house. Except that when I go to the auction and I start bidding and I bid 500 and 520, 530, you think, well, I'm still okay. I don't even realize that the owner, the vendor, actually wants more than that. They want at least 600,000. But hey, the agent got me to come to the auction. I got all the checks and balances on that house to make sure that I do want to bid for it, and then it becomes emotional. And I'm not the only one doing it. Other people are doing it, and they've all got sucked into this $500,000 roughly property that they knew it's not going to go for 500. It's just to suck you in. So this is what they do. Here's one story that explains that.
After the long summer holidays, real estate auction season starts this week. But agents, be warned, authorities will be watching for signs of underquoting. Experts say it's rife throughout the industry, and with hot markets in Sydney and Melbourne particularly, complaints are rising. And while New South Wales leads the way with legislation tackling underquoting, the fines handed out to offenders are tiny compared to those issued in Victoria. Emily Stewart's been investigating.
Melbourne's Inner West has got the selling agent in hot water.
We underquoted it clearly. What happened is one of the guys should have raised the price range after the owners expressed their reserve price, and he didn't do it. So we got done, and rightly so, we should have raised the price range.
Village Real Estate Newport advertised the property at $770,000 last year, despite the owners setting reserve at $950,000 and rejecting a $900,000 offer. It sold at auction for just under $1 million.
Okay, he's the current Australian Reserve Bank governor. Here's what he has to say.
Before an audience of Canadian visitors, Philip Lowe aired the country's dirty laundry.
Households are carrying more debt than they have before, and at the same time they're experiencing slower growth in their nominal incomes than they have for some decades. And for many households, this is proving to be a sobering combination.
There was more sobering news today. Wage growth remains at a record low, so no extra cash to repay the $2 trillion worth of debt they've racked up. That's 1.25 times the economy's total output, and it's almost all invested in one place.
Housing.
But hey, everything's fine and dandy because interest rates are at the 5,000-year low, according to some, and Martin Armstrong in particular. People can afford to borrow a lot more money, and their repayments are not that big because the low interest rates, but what happens when they rise?
The ratio of household debt to income is at a record high, although the low level of interest rates means that the debt servicing burdens aren't particularly high at the moment.
But it isn't just down to the RBA. The banks could move rates up independent of any move in the official cash rate. Global interest rates are on the way up, and APRA could force banks to hold more cash. Those costs will be passed on to debt-laden households.
There's a risk that interest rates could work their way higher by about a half to a 4 percentage point over the course of the next year.
Yeah, good luck to all of those who bought property that they clearly couldn't afford. Here's another happy government story where they will do anything to keep the property going. The developers, their stamp duties, the whole system, the whole Ponzi scheme to keep it going. Here's a happy story.
Property analysts say the Victorian government's initiative to waive stamp duty for first home buyers will be a disaster. Instead of making housing more affordable, they say cheaper housing on Melbourne's fringes will become more expensive, and the tax savings will go straight to the vendors. Emily Stewart reports.
This house in Frankston in Melbourne South is listed at around $500,000, but stamp duty changes to make it more affordable for first home buyers could end in a windfall for the owners.
I think it's well intended, but I think it's a disaster. I think it's very naive. I think that the market forces that are conspiring to create current circumstances, which do make difficult for first home buyers, need to be played out in a far longer game.
Someone who's looking...
So in short, it's just going to push the prices up by that so-called saving that the Victorian government is going to give the first home buyers. Guess where their money is coming from? Taxpayers, us, you and me. But wait, there's more. Remember how the Federal Reserve Bank, Australian Reserve Bank, Philip Lowe, said that people can service their loans due to low interest rates. Well, here's another happy story, or not, for the home owners. Just watch this one.
Back home, the Reserve Bank of Australia left interest rates on hold today at a record low of 1.5% for the 7th straight month. Carrington Clark takes a look at what rising rates in the US will mean for Australia.
No surprise today for the 67 economists surveyed by Reuters, who all tipped no move from the Reserve Bank. But global rates are likely to rise soon anyway, thanks to the US.
Well, given the market is now expecting a Fed rate hike in March, the surprise is if they don't go.
But unlike 2013, when the Federal Reserve attempted to taper the amount of stimulus in the economy, analysts aren't expecting fireworks this time around.
Yeah, there's no tantrums coming from the markets or conniptions as they roll off this easy monetary policy, partly because the economic conditions and momentum have been so strong. The earnings growth in North America has been consistent and strong.
The Federal Reserve is expected to hike by 0.25% next week.
All right, so what's happening? The interest rates are going up. There's no ifs or buts. There's not even whens it's going to happen. A 93% chance at the moment that they're going to jack it up. It is only 0.25%, but the interest rates are on their way up. So that cannot be good for the highly leveraged asset class such as the housing, as far as I can see it. But hey, you never know. It could just continue to go up forever. What do you think?